When there's trouble for G.I. Joe, you gotta get out your G.I. Joe. Copter's waiting, time to go. Gotta rescue G.I. Joe. Better move out your G.I. Joe. Mission accomplished, G.I. Joe.
Alright, Danman, let's go. Yep, the sword is equipped. Good. Oh, wait a minute. Not the sword. These are the throwing axes. Not throwing axes, throwing daggers. There we go. Okay. Onward, Sir Daniel, to victory! Hey, you think you can hit me? Huh? What was that? Just when the plot was getting good. So what? Mm-hmm. Huh? Ah, okay. So your little friend there fell off the shelf and broke his leg. Typical. Those action Joes are always looking for action in the wrong places. Here, let me get him from you real quick. Come here, little buddy. That's it. Oh, wow. You really did a number on yourself, didn't you, little dude? Alright, Sea Adventurer, don't you worry. I'm going to get our little friend here put back together, and I'm going to make sure he gets back to you guys in no time. So just feel free to head on back to headquarters or base camp or whatever you want to call your shelf system with all your friends. I'll fix him up and I'll bring him back as soon as he's ready. Oh, right back at you, little dude. Anyways, as you were, sailor. Alright, little dude. Lay out on the stretcher here. Please keep arms inside the stretcher at all times until after the operation is over. Let me get that hat for you there. Alright. So, first things first, we're going to need a sedative. Hey Joe, what's that over there? Sorry, Joe, I really hated to do that to you, little fella, but I'm out of the regular stuff. Anyway, while the patient is unconscious, let's get to work and see what we've got to work with here. Now, as a precaution to all you watching, you're going to be seeing a little bit of action figure nudity, but that's okay. These guys are not anatomically correct, so you're not going to be seeing too much. Anyway, to start things off, we start by removing the clothing. Another thing to be careful and mindful of with these old action figures is, especially just given how old these guys are, that plastic tends to become more brittle, especially the white plastic that they used for the joints. I have an example around here somewhere. Here it is. But see that white plastic right here coming up out of this ankle? Over time, this especially, because hopefully you'll be able to see how thin that is, because how thin that is, it just becomes very easy to snap. So you gotta be real careful with these boots. That one came off fine, thankfully. But who's to say how well its twin over here is going to fare? Don't want to jinx myself. There we go. Okay. Got the boots off. Set those aside with the rest of his uniform. Now, obviously we know the leg is broken, but let's see just how broken it actually is. Let's go ahead and take this pant leg off and... oh, That's just completely dislocated, isn't it? All right. Well, we've sussed out what the problem is. That leg is just... the rubber band inside has completely snapped off. So go ahead and remove this toothpick that was in there for some reason. And there's his thigh ball, or his ball joint for his thigh. Okay, we're going to set that over here off to the side. And now that I took that toothpick off, I can just about guarantee, yep. Can just go ahead and pull that through. So for those of you not in the know when it comes to these old action figures, especially G.I. Joes, they had essentially a big old piece of elastic cord that was strung through them. For the regular non-talking Joes, because as I'll demonstrate here in a moment, this is a talking Joe from 1966. Someone put the wrong head on him at some point. This is an Adventure Team head, either from a land adventurer or an Adventure Team commander. Regardless, with these guys, they have a pull-string talking mechanism, like Woody in Toy Story, only instead of coming out their back, it comes out their chest. And for those who missed that, he said, G.I. Joe, U.S. Army, reporting for duty. But anyway, with these figures, because there's a talking mechanism in here, a little record player, there's not enough room inside the figure to have the string go from leg A up through the body into the bottom of the neck connector and then back down to the body into leg B. So what they did in this situation is they used a much smaller piece of elastic cord, just long enough to get from leg A through the thigh ball, through the pelvis, through the opposing thigh ball, and into the other leg. As hopefully you can see. Because I know I've got big hands and they're like covering up everything. And they had to make an adjustment to the bodies to make sure the legs would stay on. So what they did for that was they put a little peg right here. If you see that pin right in the middle, that the piece of elastic goes up, over, and back out. Another key difference between these talking figures and the regular Joes made in that time period is the fact that these guys, you can actually unscrew their back and take them apart that way. Which is what we're going to need to do once I get done fixing the legs. So for the moment, we're just going to set our little Joe friend here off to the side with his uniform. Now, I think I have a piece that'll be able to help us get really far into this really quickly, because when I bought a lot of G.I. Joe accessories a few years ago, I happened across this. Hopefully you can see that fairly well. Essentially, this is that connector piece that I was just talking about for the legs. And when I first found this, I didn't realize what it was, and it's just been sitting in a box with the other G.I. Joe extra bits and pieces I've had. But now I've sussed out that more than likely this is a replacement elastic cord for one of these G.I. Joes. Or for all I know, this could have come from another toy, but it just happens to be just about the exact size and length that we need. So to start things off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate the parts, because I don't want to get these mixed up. I'm sure these pieces are interchangeable, but because of my OCD, or what I like to refer to as my OCD, I prefer, if this originally came with came attached to this leg, I want it to continue to stay with that leg, if that makes sense. It doesn't really matter too much, but that's just the way I am. Alright, so then we have the pelvis here. And as you can see, like I was alluding to, with the plastic over the years becomes brittle, and because of that, this pelvis has a weird crack going right here. And yes, haha, get the jokes out now, he's got a butt crack. But yeah, that we don't have to address right now. Some collectors of these G.I. Joes would probably just toss this in a parts bin and grab an extra pelvis that they've got lying around, but I don't have that luxury, so we're going to use what we've got. So this Joe got exposed to water at some point, and that combined with age just ruined the elastic that was inside of him, which is why when he fell from the shelf, his leg came right off. Also, you can just about make out the fact that the elastic on this side is like just hanging on. If I tugged on that too much harder, that's just going to come right off. So we're going to need a couple of tools for this. So I'll be right back in a moment, folks. I'm going to kind of tidy up our little workspace here a little bit, and then I'm going to flash back in with the parts that I need. And there we go, folks. Okay, so for this next bit, here's what we're going to need to do this quick little repair. We're going to need a pair of wire cutters to deal with the little metal thing in there, whatever you call these things, because we got to cut that off on both sides so we can remove that completely. And we'll also need to make a cut on these new ones so we can slide it in. Because with these old G.I. Joe dolls, and well, for the sake of this video, they are action figures, but they're strung together like an old-fashioned doll, as image will illustrate. But to restring this guy, we'll need to do that. Then, to help get the metal pieces out, we'll need some needle nose pliers. Now for this particular portion, I'm not sure if I'm going to need these long-nosed ones, or if these regular needle nose pliers are going to work. That's why I have both of them. For a little later on in the project, to open up G.I. Joe over here so we can put the legs back on, we're also going to need a flathead screwdriver. Now, to my knowledge, most of these old talking G.I. Joes from 1966 when they were introduced, which is around the time this guy was produced, through to the 1970s, they've almost always had flathead screws. If you come across one with Phillips head screws, X head, then it might be a replacement, it might be an original. I don't know everything about these G.I. Joes, and I'm not going to claim to be an expert. As a matter of fact, this is the very first time in my life that I'm going to be attempting any kind of a repair like this. So if I mess up, then, well, I mess up and I'm going to have to spend a lot of money to get extra parts to put them back together properly. So without further ado, let's get into this. So, we take our wire cutters and we find the right spot inside. We hook onto that metal thingamabob, the whatever this is, as I pointed out before, and we clamp. Okay, I managed to actually split the metal. Now I just have to get a gap wide enough through the center. This is where these come in. Now, come on, you son of a gun. There. Okay, see? Side one, done. And actually, before I go moving on to the second one, I'm going to set that off to the side, and I want to see if this is actually going to be long enough. So, if we match up the ends like so. Now, one thing to keep in mind, if you notice that the one that I'm measuring right here, the original one, seems a bit longer than the one I'm working with presently, that is because over the years the original one has gotten stretched out from being within the figure. Now let's go ahead and use these pliers to kind of bend this somewhat back into shape so I can see if it's going to be wide enough, or if the new one's going to be wide enough. It's very similar in diameter. Alright, this should work. I've just got to be very careful with this because this is the only one I've got. Alright. So now, moving on to the other leg. Oh, that's so much easier. Okay, helpful hint, folks. If you gently twist it back and forth while clamping on it, it'll cut through the metal that much quicker. And for anyone doubting me, no, I did not have that, like, pre-cut or anything like that. There we go. Alright, there's the old one out. Let's go ahead and get a look inside the leg, see how it's doing in there. Alright, that one doesn't look too bad. I suppose these, these could both use a wash. Alright, to do this the quick way, I'm going to use some disinfecting wipes. So for this, we're just going to kind of wrap this around the end of the needle nose pliers, clamp it, wrap it, and just kind of do a little of this kind of action. See how gnarly that is? Hopefully you can, because it is pretty bad. Alright, leg number 1 is how you say done. And now leg number 2, I'm coming for you. Okay. So there's that stage taken care of. And because I still have these on hand, and because, well, I don't have any paper towels on hand, I don't want to make y'all wait for me to go and get some. Got some napkins for my last food review. Just going to go ahead and use that to dry it up on the inside. So now comes the challenging bit, where we have to... I just realized the rivets that they used to put this thing together, this one is slightly smaller than that one, slightly thinner. It's not going to affect anything, but I just thought that was kind of interesting. Okay. So since this is going to go in this way, we've got to make sure that we cut from the top. So get the fluff out of the way. Then we just gently here, maybe if I do no, get that farther up, wiggle it back and forth like that, make sure it's actually in frame so you can see what I'm doing. There. You want to make a gap that you can just about, wait, there's a white spot on the table right there. You want to make a gap just big enough that you can hook it into the leg and onto that bar. And you also want to make sure you open it wide enough that it can do such a thing. Okay, so is that wide enough as it is, or do I need to? I need to. Alright, grab our other pair of pliers, and we just gently bend that, probably open the other way. Okay. See if we can, no, it needs it to be a little wider still. Come on. Needs to be wider. as wide as I'm comfortable opening that without breaking the metal. There we go. It's hooked. Now to make sure it's actually going to stay hooked on there, just gently bend that metal back towards where it's supposed to be, like so. See, that's not going nowhere. Alright, now for this next step, we're going to open up this side so that we can get those legs reattached. So same thing as before, you want to cut from the top down. So like this, second pair of pliers like this, gently, ever so gently, wiggle that back and forth until it cuts through the metal. Like that. And then we want to open up a little bit of metal on the end there. I'm trying to be careful because this piece of metal is a fair bit rusty. Not quite as rusted out as the original cord was, but it's not great. Not gonna lie, it's not great. And I do not want to bend it so far that it freaking snaps on me. But as you could probably see there, all this powder coming off, that's the powdered rust coming off of there. Now I'm not going to fully put this together yet, but I'm going to check and see if that's a wide enough opening. It is. Alright, so now, thigh ball number 1, slide that on, pelvis, like so, then thigh ball number 2, and now for the main event. We slip that piece of metal in there, get it hooked on the leg nice and proper. Then we take our pliers and we bend that little piece of metal back into place. Again, gently, because we don't want to break it off and ruin all the hard work we just put into this project. And ta-da! Got ourselves a pair of G.I. Joe legs ready to go back on the body. It's going to be a nice tight pair of legs too. This guy's going to stand up real good. Alright, so with that step out of the way, we'll just set his legs over here to the side. And gonna have to do another quick little cut here, and when I come back we're gonna finish up this little project. Okay folks, now we're on to the second portion of this, which is just the reattachment of the legs to the body. So as I said before, just have to remove these 2 screws right here, and this whole assembly should fall apart. So before I do that, I'm going to put him back on the stretcher so none of the parts fall too far and get broken. Screw number 1 and screw number 2. Alright, come on, there we go. Sometimes you got to twist the arms a little bit to get them to pop open. Alright, come on, Joe. Open up to me, little fella. There we go. Now, one thing right off the bat I want to let you guys know about. I have been inside this figure before because the voice box was a little messed up. This right here is not original to the figure. Originally it would have had a little piece of sponge, kind of like a kitchen sponge, like glued right here to add pressure to make sure that you can actually understand the voice box. Because, well, excuse me, Joe. It's honestly surprising he hasn't woken up at all yet since the start of the video. Some good sedative I gave him. But anyway, the more pressure that's put on this, the clearer it is to hear what he's trying to say. Like so. Like that first one was, "This is Charlie Company, send reinforcements." And that second one he said was, "Cover me, I'll get that machine gun." Now, one thing that I want to do for this particular video is I want to make it so that both his arms are fully posable. And what's currently preventing that is the fact that, well, hold on, whoops-a-daisy. All right, when I turned this over, it was this way. So this screw would go on this side and vice versa. But if you notice right here, there's this kind of off-colored, almost tan-looking piece of material. When this Joe was first produced, this was a piece of rubber. And that rubber was originally attached to the arm. And that was basically like a little rubber gasket that made it easier to pose these figures. But for some reason, over the past 60 years, well, almost 60 for this fella, that rubber deteriorated, and in this case it seems to have basically fused to the plastic. What I want to do is, since both halves of that material are still here, here's the first half of it, here's the other half. What I would like to do, oh, and that's what it would have looked like originally. Trying to get the right lighting on that. Right there. See how it's got that vertical rectangular slit right there? That was so that it would hold in place on the little plastic peg that sticks out of the arm. What I want to do with this particular video is I want to take half of it, probably going to take this back piece here, and I want to, if I'm able to do so without destroying it, I want to get it off of there and attach it over here and probably kind of carve out that middle rectangular piece there so it's rounded so that Joe will have full motion in his shoulders again. Okay, so I think I've got what I can use for this. Since I've been looking after a pair of spiders that were in my basement, and I've got them in a couple of nice little enclosures, when I go to get crickets, the little bags the crickets are in come with these little bitty rubber bands like this. So I'm thinking if I can take one of these and like twist it around itself like that and get that around that, that it might just make a decent replacement for the original gasket things. It's not going to be a perfect or a permanent fix. Alright, doubled up over itself, stretched to its absolute limits, and then we gently, ever so gently, because again, brittle plastic, work that down over the post. Okay. Now let's try that. Aha! There we go. Can move his arm around. Okay, got ourselves a solution here. Using things, just things that I have here on hand at my home. Okay. So before I go breaking this other original rubber gasket thing off the end, I'm going to go ahead and attach that band to that arm. Okay, and now we just go right on ahead and we pop off the leftovers of the other gasket. Now we pop that one in there. Aha. Excellent. This guy's going to be fully posable again. So now we can move on to the step of reattaching the legs. For this, you'll want the front half of the talker body, like so. And of course, you'll want the legs. You'll want to make sure they have the pelvis facing the right way, otherwise Joe's going to be the wrong way around from the legs down. So just kind of push the legs together like this. So you got the bit of elastic poking up from like that area. And then for this spot you'll want a screwdriver, because you'll want to thread it through the elastic like so over top of the pelvis to hold those legs in place, and to make sure that the elastic isn't just going to slip back in the body when you attempt this next bit. And again, I cannot stress enough, you have to be a bit careful because this plastic does get fragile over the years. You'll want to gently maneuver this so that the pin that I just pointed out goes under the band. And there we go. Apparently Joe's still going to be a bit floppy, but compared to him having his legs detached entirely, I'll take it. But anyway, there's his legs reattached. Now we just go ahead and we put that towel back on here. And we want to make sure we get the arms on the correct sides of the body. And one easy way to deal with making sure the arms are the right way around, with some of these G.I. Joes, they will actually have marked on the biceps and the adjoining pieces the letter for which side they're supposed to go on. Like this one has an R on it for the right side. Same applies to this calf here, and the foot is obvious. And the same applies to the left side of the figure. So once you make sure everything's lined up, go ahead and prepare to put the body back together. So arm 1, arm 2. Going to go ahead and adjust the head. Then we just slide that on like so. And this is the part where it's probably going to start getting frustrating for a bunch of you out there, depending on your patience levels. Because as you can see, as I'm trying to hold everything together, Joe here just keeps falling apart at the seams. Like I was saying, you want to make sure everything is lined up and in its proper place. And you'll want to start by aligning the shoulder portion of the torso. There. So you want to line up the shoulder portion of the torso as thus. And then while keeping a decent amount of pressure on it, you'll want to pull down on the pelvis nice and slowly. Oh, wait a minute, I see something else that went wrong. That napkin, that paper towel, what have you, slipped out of place. And if this winds up inside the mechanism, he's toast. There's all kinds of little things like that that can go wrong, folks. Believe you me. Alright, so again, when you get to this step, gently pulling down on the pelvis, just kind of slide the torso together like that. Check and make sure that everything's the way it was. You know, make sure his joints are all still functional. Can you still move your head? Yep. Okay. Now, for whatever reason, the lower half of his torso doesn't want to close all the way. Oh, I see what it is. For some reason, the pin upon which the legs are attached is not quite lining up. Okay. Joe, you just had to make my day difficult, didn't you? Okay, if I can just get the screwdriver in there far enough. There. Got him. And once that rubber band relaxes, or that elastic relaxes, or tenses up, or what have you, Joe here will be back to fighting shape, and he'll be able to stand up on his own, all by his little lonesome. Alright, so now we just go ahead and quickly, before anything else funny goes wrong, screw his torso together. And you don't want to over tighten these, otherwise you will crack that plastic. I cannot emphasize enough just how brittle these old action figures have gotten. There. Got ourselves one fully repaired talking G.I. Joe action soldier. Now we just got to get him dressed again, and then we can move on to the next portion of this video. Stay tuned, y'all. And now, once we're at this stage, with these fuzzy-headed ones, you can just kind of squish the hat on, and because of the fuzz, the hat usually won't just fall off. And there we go. One talking action soldier with the wrong head, with both legs reattached and ready for duty. So, without further ado, let's take our little friend here back to base. Alright, little dude, let's get you back on the shelf with your little friends. There you go. Let's move you back a little bit, get her on nice and in position. Alright. Now you boys play nice. I think I overheard a commotion over my video game before, before our little friend Sea Adventurer over here wound up coming to my office with your little friend there. If I find out any of you guys were misbehaving, you're going to wind up in the box. And I mean it. For whatever reason, I'm looking at you specifically. Now then, at ease, gentlemen. And thank you again, Sea Adventurer, for bringing that to my attention. Hopefully he wasn't broken for too long. Anyway, as you were.
There's trouble for G.I. Joe. You gotta get out, you're G.I. Joe.